like to call the meeting to order if I could. Thank you for being here and for running the gauntlet to get here. There were times I wasn't sure I was going to make it through the orange flags, but we made it, and hopefully some others will join us soon. And thanks to those who are joining us online. We appreciate your participation today. We do have a quorum today. We were provided an agenda in advance of the meeting, and we received no suggestions or requests to alter that agenda. So I would request a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Leland. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Joe. Any debate or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Any abstentions? That's unanimous. We were provided a copy of meeting notes from our March 8 meeting and made a couple of corrections to those. I would request a motion to approve the meeting notes as corrected.
So moved.
Is there? Thank you, Leland and Randy. Any debate or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay?
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't.
Okay, you're being a tough guy today, huh? Thanks, Tom, for being here. It's almost unanimous. Our first presentation today, it will be by Ben Hudson, who's the acting agriculture water optimization program for the Department of Food and Agriculture. And we appreciate your being here, Ben, to talk to us about the water optimization program and give us an update. So we'll ask you to, there you are. Got a glare in the window there, and it looks like you have a halo.
All right, so yes, my name is Benjamin Hudson with the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food. Benjamin Hudson, Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, work on the water optimization program. Was briefly acting program manager. We've actually hired a full-time program manager now, Hannah Fries, who's joined us at the meeting today. And I'm also going to be having Macy Tilk as one of our planners, and she's actually going to do this presentation today. But just wanted to come up and introduce Macy, let you know the change with Hannah, and just say that we're super glad to be here. This is a great group, and excited to be able to share some of the things we're doing with the program and how we're helping out the Great Salt Lake. So we'll let Macy take it from here and bring you up to speed. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. Hopefully you guys are okay with me taking the spotlight from Benjamin. Just want to echo what he said. We're happy to be here, happy to get ag represented, and happy to talk about our program and how it affects the Great Salt Lake. Okay, so first I want to emphasize the importance of agriculture in Utah. Sometimes it gets a bad rep because we use a lot of water, but as you can tell, jobs created in Utah for agriculture and over $27 billion in revenue. So I kind of would argue that water is put to good use.
How much of that's the Great Salt Lake Basin, do you know?
Oh, I do not know. That's a good question. I'm not sure. And then this is kind of a good representation by the numbers. As you can see, percent of availability per capita in the Great Salt Lake Basin compared to US availability. And some things like milk, eggs, onions, we're producing over 100% of that availability. So like stability is really important to us. And so I think agriculture should be emphasized in Utah. So a little bit about our program. So this program focuses on agriculture producers optimize their water use while maintaining or improving agriculture production and profitability. There's a 50-50 cost share, $500,000 limit. Our application period is open right now, and there's about $20 million in funding. Wow, that does not look good. Sorry. I don't know why it turned out like that. But the Great Salt Lake is an important part of our program. For the spring 2023 program funding period, there will be 20 extra points given to any projects located within the Great Salt Lake watershed. So you can kind of see that blue outline on the map. And as you can tell, previous project funding periods, there's been quite a few projects in that location, especially up in the Bear River, Bear Lake area. Yeah, so any projects located within that area will be given 20 extra points. As I said, application period is open right now and will close May 31st. So this is by the numbers. Kind of gives you a good idea of what each funding period, what we've got in terms of acres, water savings in acre feet, grant amount, stuff like that. And thing I kind of want to emphasize here is our program just continues to grow. We really want to continue to see projects in the Great Salt Lake watershed, get water to the lake, keep putting funding. Okay, so nitty-gritty project implements. Removal from this natural location. Natural streamer system, such as evaporation, transpiration, stuff like that. So common we see are lining or pipe canals, which as I reduces seepage and things like irrigation methods to pivot, line, flood to drip, etc. Finally, updating leaky or outdated equipment, which decreases the amount of water just being wasted due to inefficient equipment. And all of these projects, when they're located within the Great Salt Lake watershed, are getting water to the lake. I wanted to go over this specific kind of project, which I think is interesting. It's called the Bear River Automated Surge Irrigation, which reduces water by incrementally and repeatedly pushing large amount of water down the dike. So water is pushed down these channels about 20 to 25% of the way. Sorry. Thank you. So 20 to 25% of the way. And then once it's gone down each channel, it'll go back up to the top, and this time it'll go 40 to 45% of the way. And why this is an improvement is because the first time it goes down, it creates a surface seal so that the next time the water runs down this channel, it's just gonna run right over the top rather than creating what is called a deep soak. So it's just gonna seal that ground, it'll go right over the top, which will reduce in about 45 to 52% water savings. It'll also result in an increased production and crop longevity. So the sealing, the surface reduces deep soak so that we can use less water, divert less water, and create water conservation. Sorry, I paused, not your fault. Sorry, will you just go back? I wanted to emphasize this because I think innovation is really important in water conservation as we try and get water to the lake and to other parts of the state and reduce drought. I think that's gonna be really the key to reducing, to creating more water conservation is innovative projects like this. Okay, so there's shortcomings of optimizing water use. I wanted to address these, and the importance of this is really looking at each case-by-case basis and saying if we implement this project, what kind of effects is it going to have on the environment? So things like less seepage that is replenishing groundwater, drop in the water table, springs drying up, ecosystems around canals are removed. So like I said, just really saying, okay, if we pipe this canal, if we install a pivot, what kind of impacts are we going to see on the ecosystem as well as the farm? So looking at that holistically and really trying to understand what kind of impacts it will have are important. Okay, water rights, which is always so fun. So Senate Bill 277 helps increase collaboration between our program and Division of Water Rights. Producers are the biggest water rights shareholder and the biggest water users in the state. Their participation in this program is both voluntary and shows their willingness to put their own money into water conservation and help address Utah's water shortage. Other water users like industrial and residential don't return water to the system, agriculture does. And finally, water is currently over-allocated in the state of Utah. Working with Division of Water Rights, we're hoping this will address this issue. So continuing our work in the Great Salt Lake watershed, we hope to continue to build partnerships in UDAF so that we can get water to the lake and continue to fund projects. We'd also like to thank our partners, our government agencies, and our nonprofits that continue to help our producers implement these projects. Without you guys, our program would not be as successful as it is. And with that, questions, that's a link to a QR code to our website. There's my phone number and our email. That'll go to all of us, so just reach out if you guys have any questions. Yes.
In the state's Great Salt Lake Symposium in October, they listed agricultural use on the basin being about 4 million acre feet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what ag is using. What do you think the likely benefit to the Great Salt Lake will be from these projects in volume?
So I can't give you an exact number right now. I'm personally actually working on a plan right now to help measure the streams and seeing how much they're going and increasing by implementing these projects. So we're hoping to get a better idea. And that, like, maybe the fourth slide, I had kind of an estimation of how many acre feet in reduction that we're seeing, and that's within the Great Salt Lake watershed.
So I was taking notes. Could you repeat that number for me? I missed that.
It's on the fourth slide. I think it's, yeah, that one. So you can see great water savings acre feet, and then that's the total.
So that's 61,000 acre feet.
Correct, yeah. And that's an estimation. It'll be easier to measure it once we're looking at the natural systems rather than just a water quantification.
So it's about 2% of the 4 million that's estimated to be used.
Yeah, I mean, just based off of the math, that's correct, yeah.
Other question, you mentioned the residential industrial don't return their water to the Great Salt Lake or to the environment. I mean,
Yeah.
I think if you have a sewer plant, that sewer discharges somewhere, right?
Yeah, so I think it's
And if
kind
you're
of depends on
watering
the
landscape,
situation.
that returns water similarly to agriculture, correct?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Questions?
Yes.
Go ahead, Tim.
I'm concerned about pivots. So my concern with pivots is typically they reduce, you mentioned that you're not really affecting depletion so much. They'll typically reduce a diversion, but in many cases they will increase a depletion because they increase the evaporative
Evaporation,
losses.
sure.
Does this account for that? And can you give me a sense of how much of this is going to fund pivots? Because I think it's hard for me to see pivots as anything but an enemy to the lake because of that effect. They're great for that individual right there, but they're not doing anything for Great Salt Lake.
Okay, so you're saying, like, because we're diverting less water, but it's just evaporating? Is that what you're saying?
Well, your evaporative losses are increasing as opposed to, say, flood. So when you put those sprinkler droplets up there, you're going to evaporate a lot more than if you're just flood irrigating. So if this funding is going to switch from flood to pivot, you may be hurting the Great Salt Lake by increasing the depletions upstream. It's kind of a cumulative effect, right? Can't measure it on an individual basis so much, but that's just kind of a concern. So I wonder if you could just speak to how much of this is funding pivots, and are you taking into account, a lot depends on the pivot, right? If the pivot has a high head versus a low head, it's
Right.
a little bit different, but just a concern that I have.
Yeah, so our program is just based off of water savings. So as long as they can show water savings, that's kind of what we're most interested in. So if they're going from flood to pivot, I think it's a case-by-case basis, whether they're going from an open canal, diverting it into a pivot. I think it just depends. Benjamin may be able to speak more to that, maybe even Hannah.
Okay, I'm just wondering if it's just a decrease in diversion, does that count as savings? So if I'm diverting less, is that savings, even though my depletion hasn't changed or my depletion may have gone up? Is that still savings?
Hannah, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, and I think Candace can speak to that as well. We're going to pass the button. Okay. Just trying not to drop my computer like I just about did. That was a special moment. Thank you, Candace Hosniger with the Division of Water Resources. I think some of these questions are really, really good, and I think it gets to the heart of SB 277, really trying to understand agricultural optimization and how to effectively implement it. So I think a lot of these questions will be taken up by the Agricultural Optimization Committee that is being developed the 1st of July really is when we kind of take over in the Utah Water Task Force. We've been working closely with the Department of Ag, but these are the questions that we're wrestling with and we will consider as we evaluate projects as a committee.
And I'm Hannah Fries. I'm the program manager for the Ag Water Optimization Program with Utah Department of Ag and Food. One thing to speak to that about pivots being an enemy to the lake, we don't see a lot of those projects going in where Macy showed you that map. We're doing a lot of flood improvement projects. So we're piping open ditches and we're doing riser systems to be more efficient with our flood irrigation systems up in the Bear River Valley, in the Weber, along the Weber River, in the Cache Valley as well. So those type of projects are by and large, pivot projects are in the southern part of the state where we're pumping and having those type of irrigation projects, not in the Great Salt Lake watershed. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Other questions? I note that you've done, according to your chart, you've done 153 projects through fiscal year 2022. I imagine you've done another 50 or more in the current fiscal year. I'm wondering, are there any specific projects that stand out as kind of a wow factor? This really worked, it's cost efficient, great savings, we should implement it widespread?
I would probably say that Bear River surge irrigation, because it has a high water savings and it's kind of an innovative project. I'd probably say that one was really interesting to me.
Is it duplicatable elsewhere?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
Other questions? Tom?
Just a follow-up. So if I'm a farmer and I'm implementing one of these projects, does that mean I use more ground, or am I limited on, if I'm going to take this project money, am I capping how much water I'm going to use?
So you can't increase irrigated acres, if that helps. So you're asking like.
That was my question.
Okay. Yeah, you
So
can't.
if I save 10%, do I get to
Yeah, you can't use
irrigate
that
10% more ground and have better agricultural production?
Yeah, you can't. You can't increase irrigated acres.
So how long am I restricted on expanding my farming?
Hannah, do you know?
Are there if I take project money and now I'm using less of my water right to irrigate the same amount of ground, am I restricted in the future from acquiring other ground and using my unused water rights other places?
Yeah, that's a really good question that we'll have to answer with the committee. Our project period is for 3 years. So after you implement your project, then you'll do an annual report with us for a period of 3 years. And then after that, I don't know what teeth that we'll have through the Utah Department of Ag and Food to enforce that you will not increase your acres. And so that's something that we'll have to look at and answer those questions with the committee.
Well, and water efficiency is always good, whether it directly helps the lake or not. But I was just wondering if that was being considered.
Yes, yep. So it is spelled out in our program that you cannot increase irrigated acres.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank
Appreciate
you
your
guys.
being here. Okay, the next item on our agenda has to do with the Fremont Island. As you know, the state acquired the island a couple of years ago and has been working on a management plan for the island. My understanding is that plan has been completed and approved. And we have Marisa Weinberg here to tell us about it. If you don't know, Marisa is our interim GSL coordinator. She's wearing 2 hats today.
Wearing a lot of hats. All right. Great. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor and a privilege to stand up here today and talk to you about Fremont Island, a small piece of sometimes isolated land on Great Salt Lake that I have had the joy of getting to know really well over the past few years. I will start by giving you a bit of background on the island and how it came into state ownership, and then dive into a 30,000-foot view of the recently developed property management plan. So first and most important, it's critical to understand the story of Fremont Island. Fremont is the 3rd largest island on Great Salt Lake, measuring around 6 miles long and 2 miles wide. The Shoshone, Goshute, Ute, and Paiute tribes inhabited the Great Salt Lake ecosystem for thousands of years, Native Americans utilized the island to hunt and forage, though they never actually inhabited the island. John C. Fremont then explored Fremont Island in 1843, but due to the island's barren landscape, Fremont dubbed it Disappointment Island. In that same expedition, Kit Carson climbed to the highest point of the island and carved a small cross in the rock, now known as Kit Carson's Cross. The first actual owner of the island was the Union Pacific Railroad Company, who then sold Fremont Island to the Wenner family in 1886. The Wenners were the first private entity to own the island. Uriah Wenner moved out there in hopes that the salty air would cure his tuberculosis, but unfortunately he passed away. Uriah and his wife Kate are buried on the island on the southern tip. In 1960, Fremont was sold to the Richards family. Their family was interested in recreational development, but this didn't come to fruition. Instead, they leased the island to Barrow Land and Livestock, who introduced exotic species for private hunting purposes. When their recreational development plans failed, the Richards family sold Fremont Island to G&G Island LLC in 2018. Members of the LLC are known to many in the Utah public as the Diesel Brothers. G&G shared similar recreational goals with the Richards family, but too sold the property when these plans became infeasible. The Palladium Foundation, on behalf of the Nature Conservancy, purchased the island in 2020, placed a conservation easement on it, and donated the land to Forestry, Fire, and State Lands as a management authority. As FFSL already manages the sovereign lands of Great Salt Lake, this management donation made sense. TNC holds a conservation easement encumbering Fremont Island that will prevent future development on the island. So now the big question is, how will FFSL manage the island? So we manage the island with a property management plan. FFSL was tasked to create a management plan that would uphold the terms of the TNC conservation easement. Luckily, the division had an apt Master of Natural Resources student on staff that was willing to take it on. The initial scoping for the Fremont property management plan began in 2021, and I'm proud to say it is complete as of today. So what exactly does a property management plan do? The property management plan identifies and defines FFSL management goals and objectives for Fremont Island. It assesses the current and known conditions of ecosystem, water, geological, mineral, cultural, and community resources on Fremont Island, and describes existing uses of Fremont Island that are appropriate with the TNC conservation easement, public trust values, and multiple use and sustained yield principles. Lastly, the property management plan identifies current and future partnership opportunities with state, federal, tribal, and nonprofit partners. So who exactly are these partners? Multiple stakeholders from the Great Salt Lake community were brought to the table to discuss resource-oriented hopes and dreams for the island from the very beginning. Stakeholders on the state level include DNR and DEQ divisions, the UDOT Division of Aeronautics, the Utah Backcountry Pilots Association, Hooper City, Weber County, Davis County Public Works, the University of Utah, and multiple county weed management entities. Federal stakeholders include the USGS, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the BLM, and the Army Corps of Engineers. The Northwestern Band of the Shoshone offered cultural resource guidance and recommended protection measures. Lastly, nonprofit stakeholders in Fremont include the Nature Conservancy, National Audubon Society, and Friends of Great Salt Lake. Fremont stakeholders were invaluable in crafting resource management goals and objectives in this plan. They will stay important to us as resource-specific issues arise on Fremont Island. So the property management plan looks at both historic and current uses. In its history, Fremont has predominantly been kept as open space with very few visitors. The island is inherently desolate. After Fremont discovered the island in 1843, it was initially used for sheep grazing, as well as attempted metal and slate mining, although the mining operations were largely unsuccessful. The Wenner family lived on the island from 1886 to 1891 in the house you see here, but they were the only known residents. And then when the island was leased to Barrow Land and Livestock, exotic species were brought to the island for private hunting. There was also a bit of brine shrimp egg harvesting prior to the brine shrimp co-op forming. Both the Richards family and G&G Islands drafted plans for recreational development, although none actually happened. The Diesel brothers specifically wanted the island to be used for off-road racing, horseback riding, camping, and shooting, but conservation was never at the forefront. So TNC's donation of the island to the state of Utah secures its use as open space in perpetuity. So some current uses: Fremont is predominantly protected open space. The TNC conservation easement ensures that the island will remain this way. The island is also used for recreation. Fremont Island is public land for the first time in over a century, so those willing to trek to the island may partake in hiking or non-motorized biking. Camping and motorized vehicle use are prohibited. In addition, Fremont contains 2 primitive airstrips, so small single-engine aircraft as well as helicopters may land on the island. FFSL entered an MOU with UDOT Aeronautics in 2021 to maintain both the upper and lower airstrips on the island. Additionally, and as you see in this photo, the University of Utah has a weather station that sits on the top of the island, and that weather station sends real-time weather data to the university's database for public use. So what does the Fremont ecosystem look like? I'm sure you're all curious. The dominant vegetation is grassland, such as blue bunch wheatgrass and alkali saccaton are examples. The vegetation there, of course, needs to be able to tolerate exceptionally saline soils. Invasive rush skeleton weed has been identified on the island and is currently treated by Davis County and FFSL annually. FFSL also keeps a close eye on Fremont Island Phragmites. FFSL aims to limit future surface disturbance in order to manage for invasive species and native species protection. So there's one freshwater spring on the southern tip of the island, but otherwise no streams or creeks. The freshwater spring, though, produces minimal water, and this was a big issue when they were trying to establish sheep grazing operations on the island. So as such, there will be no future development of freshwater resources on the island. In addition, there are emergent wetlands along much of the lake shoreline. There are also limited wildlife on the island due to that the island is isolated for the most part, but it is frequented by a number of bird species. A gopher snake was spotted on a field trip last fall, maybe one of the happiest moments in my career. There are also mule deer, antelope, kit fox, skunk, raccoons, and other small mammals. The sheep, boar, and bison introduced by Justin Barrow have been entirely eradicated from the island. FFSL aims to partner with DWR, TNC, Audubon, and other wildlife-associated stakeholders to continue managing the wildlife on Fremont Island. We also understand that low lake levels might affect the ecological resources on the island, allowing for additional wildlife migration or spread of invasive species. We are hoping to conduct a wildlife survey with the Division of Wildlife Resources in the future, and we will continue to monitor for invasive vegetation. So, recreation. The division, oops, I'm so sorry. So recreation is the most common use of the island. Biking across the sandbar, hiking around the island, landing a plane on the island are all permitted. However, camping and motorized vehicle uses, as mentioned, are not. FFSL intends to engage in effective public communication by ensuring these messages are transparent, by posting physical signs and ensuring our website is up to date. Sovereign lands law enforcement will also monitor the island for illegal use. We do not have plans to develop trails as of today, but should the need arise, the management plan outlines how FFSL is to work with TNC in project development. This is the case for shade structures or other recreational enhancements as well. Our intention is not to mirror Antelope Island. Also, as mentioned, FFSL's MOU with UDOT Aeronautics allows their agency to maintain the 2 backcountry airstrips on the island. If you happen to have a small plane handy, it's recommended to communicate with UDOT Aeronautics and the FAA prior to flying out there. Drone use follows the same regulations as Antelope Island, which is prohibited between March and November. Previous landowners left behind certain structural remnants, such as mining structures, excavation sites, fences, corrals, and even a shack. There are no plans to change any of that existing infrastructure, and those existing structures will be monitored for their integrity. Lastly, there are numerous cultural resources on the island. Our division partnered with the SHPO in 2021 to conduct a cultural resources survey. Included in that survey was Kit Carson's Cross, the Winter grave sites, a petroglyph panel, and other resources we cannot disclose. FFSL plans to monitor the known cultural resource sites on the island for changes in visitation impacts. We will continue to partner with the SHPO on National Register of Historic Places designations, as well as the Utah Cultural Site Stewardship Program for on-the-ground monitoring. Most importantly, we engage with Great Salt Lake tribal stakeholders to further inform protections and other necessary management for Fremont Island cultural resources. So as you all know, the division issues permits and leases on Great Salt Lake, depending on the nature of the proposed use. For example, we issue right of entry permits to access sovereign lands for commercial photography or easements for more permanent structures such as utility lines. The proposed use is assessed for compliance with FFSL management objectives and granted permission accordingly. Although public trust values are typically associated with navigable bodies of water, these values are considered on all state lands such as Fremont Island. The same permitting and leasing processes will apply. On Fremont Island specifically, if a proposed use is not allowable or mentioned in the conservation easement, FFSL will coordinate with TNC prior to making a final decision. So I'm sure you're all wondering, how do you get there? Accessing an island on Great Salt Lake with no causeway is a little tricky. As motorized vehicles on sovereign lands are prohibited, your options are limited to bicycle, foot, watercraft, or aircraft. The journey across the sandbar, as shown in green or yellow or blue, is approximately 6.5 miles in one direction. So if you choose to walk, run, or bike, be prepared for a long journey just to the island and back. Parking is also limited to the Antelope Island Gatehouse or the marina. Watercraft, when the water is high enough, is perhaps your best option. Flat-bottom boats such as airboats or kayaks are preferred. The water channel is also about 6 miles in one direction, as shown in purple. Air travel is permitted, as mentioned, for small single-engine aircraft equipped to land on a backcountry gravel airstrip. Laura Vernon and I can attest that it's not all that scary if you're with a licensed pilot. Air travel does require prior authorization, though, as mentioned. Visitation management takes care of itself on a geographically isolated state land. Folks at the Antelope Island Gatehouse track those that drive across the Antelope Island Causeway to access the island. For those that park before the gatehouse, we have remote cameras on the island to track human activity. Determining what capacity might look like is difficult to do, as there are rarely more than a few humans visiting the island. With an average of 30 visitors per year, we keep a careful watch on looting and destruction of known cultural resources on the island. Lastly, and most importantly, is safety. The journey to the island itself is really long, and then hiking around can become very strenuous. Visitors are encouraged to take plenty of water, food, and clothing layers. There are no restrooms on the island either, and cell phone coverage is spotty. Additionally, as you know, erratic weather on the lake can affect travel conditions. The sandbar can turn to quicksand pretty quickly. We recommend taking extreme precaution with small watercraft and using fat tire bicycles. All difficulties aside, Fremont is a really unique and special place, and it's worth visiting if that becomes feasible for you. So this is just a transportation matrix created using 2016 LiDAR and elevation data that allow visitors to look at lake levels and assess a proper mode of transportation prior to embarking to Fremont Island. The matrix is included in the plan, which is now posted to our website. The routes you see on the table are related to the routes on the map that I just showed you in the previous slide. There's certainly unpredictable water fluctuations given the bathymetry of the lake bed, but these numbers are conservative enough to steer visitors in the right direction. So what comes next? The Fremont Island Property Management Plan is complete and has been adopted by our division as of May 3rd, 2023. The plan is published to our website and will be promoted on social media. We look forward to seeing our management goals and objectives through over the coming years and continuing to work with all of you in the Great Salt Lake community to uphold conservation values on this unique and special resource. TNC's purchase and donation of Fremont Island to the state of Utah is a conservation success. It's been enlightening to learn about the island's unique natural resources and truly an honor to share my past few years of work with you today. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Oh, thank you. Like I said, it's sometimes hard to wear two hats.
My question was, it seemed like your table said 4194 would make the shoreline wet all the way around the island. Is that your understanding?
So like I said, these values are highly conservative. You know, it's meant for members of the public to make a best informed decision, just because we don't want people out there, you know, even if the water is shallow enough to get an airboat across, we don't want people to attempt that.
So do we know what the shoreline elevation is? Is there a,
For the island,
for the island? Yes.
off the top of my head, I can't give you that
I'm just looking
number.
at the table. It seems like it must be 95 or 94 or something
It's
like
it's around there, but as I said, Great Salt Lake water fluctuates so often. I mean, getting to different points of it, it could vary, but this is a super conservative table that can definitely be expanded on.
I see occasionally at Stansbury Island, people are circumnavigating with ultralights. Are ultralights allowed to go out there?
What is an ultralight?
It's one of those things that has like a parachute for a sail. And you,
But it's motorized.
it is motorized.
If it's motorized,
All
then-
aircraft have to be motorized as far as I know.
Yeah, well, so aircraft, it gets a little sticky, but really small engine planes and helicopters as coordinated with UDOT Aeronautics as well as the FAA, that can be coordinated, but
So if you called those guys up, maybe they would allow that.
it gets sticky, like I said, but we do take it on a case-by-case basis, and we're happy to chat with folks who may be curious about different ways to access the island. Thanks, Tom.
A question out here? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I recently had an opportunity to read the history that was written by Kate Wenner of the years that she and her family lived on the island, and it's really kind of a moving account. It's really fascinating. Are there going to be any like interpretive signs or anything put out there so that people, when they go out, can learn some of the history that might really make the island come alive for them?
We've sort of discussed things like that. We don't want to necessarily draw attention to the cultural resources on the island, especially as that can involve looting and vandalism. But interpretive signs on maybe the entrance points to the island is certainly something we can discuss and implement if TNC is okay with that, and that's something that we find necessary. But that historical account from Kate is fascinating, and I encourage everyone to read up on it.
Other questions or comments? Why are there two airstrips? I mean, it's not like you need two.
I guess I don't really understand flight dynamics all that well, but the one on the upper part of the island, I think is a little bit easier to land on with a small engine plane. At least that's the one Laura and I landed on, and we're living to tell the story. The lower elevation airstrip, I don't know if it's used as frequently. There might be specialty planes that are more apt to land on that airstrip, but like I said, aerodynamics are not really in my purview.
Did your plan development include any projection of user days, or?
Sorry, there was a...
Use, how many user days you might have of people visiting the
No,
island?
so we work closely with the folks at Antelope Island Gatehouse, and we have our remote cameras out there, and we have that data, but unfortunately those cameras don't take photos every second, and so we're still sort of understanding what visitation looks like and what seasons people are going out there more, and getting a better grasp on that so we know if we need to manage capacity or manage when people go out there. So it is an evolving understanding, I suppose.
Thank you. Other questions?
Just
Yes.
one,
Go ahead.
just one. Did I understand that you have to get a permit to go out there, or you can just go out there if you want to?
You can go out there if you want. It's public land, so anyone is welcome to go out there. The permitting applies to specific uses that are beyond just visitation. So if you want to go out there and shoot a film that's going to be out in the media and you're going to make money off of it, you would need a permit. Or if you want to go out there and build a structure, which we're not allowing, but say you wanted to do that, that would require a permit. So
But if anybody wants to go out there, they can, whether they walk, fly, ride, or...
correct, yeah, and
And
our
I'm assuming
divisions.
a hovercraft would get out there just fine.
I didn't even consider a hovercraft, but that would be excellent. I'd love to see you, Leland, on a hovercraft getting out there. That'd be cool.
Would it be useful to perhaps people who on a whim choose to go somehow be able to sign up somewhere so you can account for who's there or who
Yeah,
didn't come back or
that's
whatever?
that's an awesome idea. Like I said, it's just hard to track folks from the Antelope side. Obviously, the people at the gatehouse are tracking people that are going out there, but for people that park before the gatehouse or people that don't go across the causeway, really we only have cameras out there right now. It could be kind of cool to put a visitor book out there, as you see on the top of some mountains, but that's something we certainly will discuss. Thanks, Lynn.
Other questions? You mentioned that one of the prior owners introduced some species for hunting. Are there any of them still there? Did they wipe them out? What kind are they?
CWR did a flight, I'm forgetting the year, but they eradicated all of those animals from above. There's been a rumor going around that there's a single wild boar, but we haven't caught anything on camera. And, you know, there's a lot of other animals out there who leave questionable scat. So I'm guessing it's not a wild boar that's still out there.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you, Marisa. Appreciate that very
Thanks,
much.
everyone.
Perhaps it would be appropriate for us to have one of our meetings out there on Fremont, huh?
We need a 30-person helicopter. I'll
Okay.
make sure it happens.
Work on that. Thank you. Because of the construction and difficulty getting here, I delayed introductions until I was sure everyone had a chance to get here. So I'd like to interject that now, go around the room. Jim, could we start with you? And
Jim Harris with the Division of Water Quality.
Randy Elliott, Davis County Commissioner.
Tom Tripp, representing Twilla County.
Annaville with the Nature Conservancy.
Marisa Weinberg, Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
Jeff Richards, Migratory Bird Production Areas.
Joe Havasi, Extractive Industries.
Wayland Myers, Sewer Folks.
Don Leonard, Aquaculture.
Dina Blake, Salt Lake County.
Well, we need a microphone, sorry.
Thank you. Lynn DeFreitas, Friends of Great Salt Lake.
Ryan Doherty, Cargill Salt.
Miguel Ramirez, Cargill Salt.
Macy Tilk, Utah Department of Agriculture and Food.
Benjamin Hudson, Utah Department of Agriculture and Food.
Hannah Freeze, Utah Department of Agriculture and Food.
Jan Streifel, Legal Women Voters.
Willie Lanier, Utah Department of Health and Human Services.
Carla Trenelman, Weber State.
Craig Miller, Utah Division of Water Resources.
Dwight Slaw, U.S. Bureau of Reclamation.
Justin Record, Bureau of Reclamation.
Blake Bingham, Water Rights.
Tim Hawks, Brine Shrimp Cooperative.
Jack Ray, Utah Waterfowl Association.
Candace Hosnager, Director of Water Resources.
Nathan Dowgs, Cache Water District.
Leila Almaudi, Division of Water Resources.
Matt Berry, Utah Rivers Council.
Laura Vernon, Division of Water Resources.
Bill Pope, HDR.
Jeff Denblaker, Jacobs.
Ben Starman, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
Keith Hambrecht, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
Liesl Roberts, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
Rob Hartman, U.S. Magnesium.
Rhonda Perks with the Office of Congressman Chris Stewart.
Thank you again, everyone, for being here. It's been a few meetings since we've had updates on some activities either directly or indirectly related to the advisory council, so we decided to give a project update. Before I do that, though, the next item on the agenda is public comment. And we've always, with every meeting we've ever had as an advisory council, we've always included time for public to make comments. And I'm asking if there's anyone who would like to take a minute. Lynn, you're on. Who else?
Don, we didn't introduce you online.
Oh, thank you. Let me see if I can do that. Those online, Janice Gardner, Dave Livermore, nice to see you, Dave. Grace Edward, Rose Smith, Marcel Shoup, Steve Erickson, Emily Hamill, Rob Dubuque. Did I miss anyone? Thank you for being with us today online. Thank you, Ann.
I just wanted to let everyone know that we have set a date for the 2024 Great Salt Lake Issues Forum. It will be May 8th, 9th, and 10th. And the working title is Preserve and Protect in Perpetuity. How are we doing? So I'll look forward to seeing you all in 2024 at the forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Someone else have comments? Candace?
Just a couple of things. I'm really glad our Bureau of Reclamation friends are here. We've been working with Director Joel Ferry to try to get additional federal funding to Great Salt Lake. And there's an opportunity open right now. It's a Water Smart grant on Aquatic Ecosystem Services grant. So that is open and we are looking to put something in, willing to partner. If anyone has any ideas, we have a pretty short turnaround. We have some ideas we're working on, but if anyone wants to talk more, let me know. And then Laura also had a request.
Laura?
Oh,
Nice to see you, Laura.
It's good to see you, Don. If you guys are interested in a future presentation topic in the next meeting, we'd be prepared to present the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan. A little update on that if you're interested.
Thank you, Laura.
Oh, Don. And I should mention one more bit about federal funding. We do have the Army Corps of Engineers awfully interested in protecting the lake. So we're working on a couple different federal funding aspects right now.
Thank you.
Don, I have a public.
Yes.
Next week is Great Salt Lake Bird Festival right here in this building. And Saturday, though, it will be open. There's things open to the public, but you can go online at greatsaltlakebirdfest.com if you want to look to see if any field trips are open.
Thank you, Ann. Anyone else? Going once, twice, 3 times. Thank you for your participation and comments. Now let's jump to project status. Marisa, do you want to cover Salinity Advisory Committee?
Yes, happy to. So the Great Salt Lake Salinity Advisory Committee submitted their recommendations pertaining to the interim protocol for berm modifications on April 6, 2023. The interim protocol was prepared to address requirements in Governor Cox's February 3rd executive order. It will guide future adjustments to the height of the Great Salt Lake Causeway berm. The Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands is currently working to adopt the interim protocol. The committee is working to develop a more robust protocol to update the interim protocol in early 2024 based upon observed changes in the lake.
Thank you, Marisa. Any comments or additions in regards to the Salinity Advisory Committee? Appreciate their good work. Great Salt Lake Technical Team met yesterday. Marisa, do you want to give us a report?
Correct. So the Great Salt Lake Technical Team did meet yesterday. The Great Salt Lake Technical Team grants for fiscal year 2024 were also ranked and discussed yesterday among a small subcommittee of tech team members. Those to be awarded contracts will be notified in the coming days.
Thank you. Any questions about the technical team meeting or the hot topic grants? All right, next let's do USGS, UGS groundwater study and flow model. Marisa.
So the USGS and UGS are working on refining a groundwater flow model for the Great Salt Lake system. They are assessing groundwater inputs to the lake, including groundwater discharge to the lake bed, freshwater springs, as well as interactions between groundwater and adjacent streams. Improving estimates of groundwater inputs and outputs will better provide an understanding of the relative importance of groundwater flow to Great Salt Lake, allowing predictive modeling of potential hydrologic changes and better constraining inputs for other Great Salt Lake models.
Thanks, Marisa. Any questions or comments about that or additions? Fire away, Leland.
And you might not be able to answer this, or you might have to refer to Laura in the back to do it, but there was a study that we helped fund several years ago by USGS on nutrient balance to the Great Salt Lake. Has that ever been even published?
I can speak to that. So
maybe
that was in fact funded a couple years ago, back during Laura's time. The USGS had to shift their focus to salinity when salinity became an increasingly apparent issue in maintaining Great Salt Lake ecosystem. So the nutrient study is still there. It just hasn't been completed yet because USGS had to shift their priorities. So it's still happening, but has not been published yet.
They have been gathering data, correct?
Correct, yes.
We don't have any idea on the time frame.
Not currently. I've yet to receive an update from them on it, but hopefully this year.
That's what we said last year.
Hopefully next year.
Yeah, hopefully someday, maybe.
Okay, thank you. During the current fiscal year, there were 3 projects that we contributed funding to. First one was the Shorebird Survey. We agreed to contribute $35,000 to a Shorebird Survey project. The fall portion of the survey was completed in data collection in October of 2022. The spring portion was completed just last month, and they're currently working the data to compile a final report. We expect the final report to be completed by the end of June, and we've invited them to report back to us at our September meeting. By then, they should have their final report. Any questions about that? The second project that we helped fund was the Bear River Economic Impact Study. The folks from Bear River region, I think, saw the usefulness of our economic benefits study that we completed in 2012. We had a number of conversations with them. They were interested in determining the economic impact of the Bear River. And as you know, they came to us for some funding. We had a discussion at 2 different meetings, made some suggestions on how to make it more relevant to Great Salt Lake. They accepted those revisions. The overall cost of their study is $179,550. Our contribution is $14,900, so pretty good leverage there. The contractors they've recently selected to work on the project include Conservation Economics Institute, which is based in Twin Falls, Idaho, and Econ Northwest, which you may recall we used, and they did a study for us that was released in November 2019 entitled Assessment of Potential Costs of Declining Water Levels in the Great Salt Lake. And that study has been quoted widely and frequently. Their completion target is December of 2023, and we've talked to them about coming and giving us a report at either the January or March meeting in 2024. Any questions about that? Okay, the third study that we contributed to in the current fiscal year. You may recall that in 2016, a bathymetric study of the lake was conducted by USGS to provide a map of the bottom of the lake. That study and report has been useful to many people. I think Marisa even referenced using it in developing the Fremont management plan. Since 2016, the technology for such a project's greatly improved, and there were some shortfalls, if you will, in the prior study. And so we were approached about helping fund a pilot program to test them and prove the methodology. We contributed $74,986 to that plan. And then the contractors went to the legislature and were able to obtain, what was the dollar amount, Marisa, do you recall?
For the legislative funding?
For the bathymetric study.
So 1.8
million for both the lake, Great Salt Lake, and Bear Lake. So
Correct.
To do both. And I don't recall the breakdown between the two. Anyone know? Terrific, thanks, Ben. They got their priorities right. Okay, final report should be completed by late summer, and we'll have them come and report back to us. Actually, our preliminary project is complete, and we'd like to invite them to our July meeting to provide that report and give us an update on where they're going. So, any questions? All right. We've been waiting for the conclusion of the hot topics process for Great Salt Lake technical team to help identify a number of potential projects on the lake. As you know, we have $125,000 to allocate. We've asked for people to submit ideas. We still would like to keep that period open until the end of May. Any suggestions, ideas, or requests about how we should allocate that funding We've got some projects that have been suggested. We'd like a few more to choose from. And then our project subcommittee has been Marisa and Leland and I. If there are any other members of the council who would like to join and participate in that review, we'd be happy to include you. And Joe? Okay, great. Thank you. All right. What about topics for future meetings? I mentioned a few. What topics are you interested in having on our agenda? And I'll ask both council members and the public. Lynn?
When the appointment is filled, the next, or the Great Salt Lake Commissioner?
Sure, definitely.
Yeah.
I actually have on our list for July the preliminary LiDAR study, the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan, and the new commissioner. But we can bump any of those. In September, I mentioned the Shorebird study. Don't have anything on my list yet for November, so thank you, Lynn. Other suggestions? Yes, Tom.
You know, it might be interesting and instructive to have someone do a prehistoric reconstruction of Lake Bonneville to the present, of what the lake level and what the cycles have been. And, you know, I haven't talked to her, but Genevieve Atwood has done quite a bit of research in that way. She might be an interesting presenter to look at what's gone on in the last 12,000 years.
Quick show of hands from council members interested in such a presentation. How about members of the public? Pretty good interest. Thank you, Tom. Good suggestion. Others, Lynn?
Yeah, one online.
Who? Dave, fire away.
Is he still muted?
I thought the report from the Great Salt Lake GSL wet would be helpful, the water trust.
Okay. We did not. The activities of the water trust. I agree that would be a good topic. We've been, put that down, Dave. I'll put it down.
Okay, great.
Others?
It may be a little far afield, but it's adjacent land use. What about the idea of having a presentation from Ben Hart, the executive director of the Utah Inland Port Authority? There are so many impacts, externalities that are occurring on the landscape, water, habitat, especially adjacent to Great Salt Lake. And just to make the world a smaller place, it might be useful for the Port Authority Board, the executive director, to meet the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council. Just a thought.
Yes, Candace?
Just one other idea, now that you guys need more things to listen to, but you know, that with the last two legislative sessions, a lot of money has been appropriated for water conservation activities. And if you're interested in hearing kind of where they at, what's going on with them, they impact the whole state, but you know, there's a lot of emphasis on Great Salt Lake. So we'd be happy to share an update with you guys if you're interested.
That would be you or your division? Great, thank you. Good suggestion.
Keith Hambrecht, Invasive Species Coordinator with Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. I could also give an update on Phragmites control efforts. Fall or next winter would be a good time for that.
We used to have a Phragmites report on kind of a regular basis, so that's a good suggestion. Others? Plenty to do. No prospects of canceling a meeting. Okay, well, thank you. Any other suggestions? All right. Maybe for the very first time in our history, we'll end before the appropriate time. Our next meeting is July 12, and I believe it's in this location. Is that correct, Marisa?
The meeting in July will be here, yes.
Thank you. Okay. This is still a good location for people? Raise a hand. All right.
Where will the construction be?
Yeah. Well, the construction project will be finished in the spring, right? Y'all made it here. You can do it again. All right. Any other comments or suggestions or business from members of the council? Thank you for being here. We appreciate your active involvement in the, like, Tom?
I've just got a quick one here. You know, I look at the public meeting website and I get the agenda. Are we getting all these presentations posted on the website
Jim,
for the
Marisa?
public to observe? Or even better, if we had them in advance, people could come prepared having thought about them. So it's kind of common practice now in the state to post available meeting materials before the start of the meeting so people can see them and be prepared to talk to them. Just a suggestion.
Let us work on that.
And one other observation, I've been monitoring the lake elevation, and right now, the marina lake elevation is not agreeing very well with one out there close to the control berm. And I don't know if that's the flow across the berm right now that's causing that, but the elevation measurement by UGS out at the control bridge opening out there is substantially lower than the one at the marina, and suggests, in fact, the lake's on a downward trend. I don't know if anyone else had noted that. But I was out there last week, and there is water flowing over the top of the berm at this point. I don't know if it had washed out some of those rocks, and it's even measuring lower right there at that spot. Also, at the west opening, it's now connected through the berm, the west side opening. The water is underneath it, and the flow is pretty low over there, but there's a visible flow going through the west opening because the lake's come up that far.
Thank you, Tom. Any comment about that? Marisa, you were?
I would defer to the USGS who are monitoring water levels out there.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if
it just
there's
seems like the boat harbor is accurately portraying things, and the other one out on the causeway probably has to do with the flow through that bridge right now, but I don't know.
We'll follow up on that. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. Is there a second? Second. Any debate or discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thanks for being here. And thank you to our presenters. Very appreciate it.
Just a quick one.